Hi guys, so for today's video, we will going to discuss the 20 most common grammar mistakes. And based on my research, these are all the most common grammar mistakes. So I've already prepared a Word document for this for a convenient discussion. So the first one is the run-on sentences. It is a sentence that contains multiple independent clauses that are enjoyed with a proper punctuation. It often uses commas instead of using a period. It omits necessary conjunctions like and or where. So example for this is I went for a walk in the park, comma, I saw a cat running up a tree, comma, and I met my friend for coffee. So the correct option number one for this is breaking up it into smaller sentences. So you would go like this. I went for a walk in the park, period. I saw a cat running up a tree, period. I also met my friend for coffee, period. The second option for this is adding conjunctions. So I went for a walk in the park, comma, and I saw a cat running up a tree, period. Then, comma, I met my friend for coffee. The third option is the replacing comma with an em dash. So it would go like this. I went for a walk in the park, em dash. I saw a cat running up a tree, em dash, and I met my friend for coffee, period. The second one is the sentence fragments. It occurs when you write an incomplete sentences. As we all know, a sentence would incomplete without the subject and the verb. So every time you omit either a subject or a verb only, you separate it individually, you emit a sentence fragment, which is another common grammar mistakes. An example for this is during the thunderstorm, period, hiding under the blankets, period. Correct option number one for this is during the thunderstorm, comma, we were hiding under the blankets. Correct number two is during the thunderstorm, comma, I stayed indoors and hid under my blankets. So we are using a helping verb for this in order to complete the thought and not separate it individually. Third one is grammatical errors involving apostrophes. So let's go with apostrophe with contractions. You need an apostrophe when you create a contraction, such as won't, don't, or isn't. Example, I haven't seen you for a while. You didn't put here a apostrophe after the N. So the correct one is I haven't seen you for a while. Second, apostrophe with possessiveness. You usually need to use apostrophe to make the noun possessive. Example, the child's toy was left outside. After the D, you didn't put apostrophe here, so the correct one is the child's toy was left outside. Third one, apostrophe with plurals. You should never use an apostrophe to make noun plural. If you're talking about a group of people or things, you don't need an apostrophe before the S. Example, my cats are named Gabby and Sky. You should not put an apostrophe after the T here because you're talking about a group of people or things. So instead, the correct one for this is my cats named Gabby and Sky. Let's proceed to the fourth one, inconsistent pronouns. Make sure that your pronouns match the nouns they're referring to. Example, every student should bring their own notebook to class. You should not use their because as what I've mentioned earlier, pronouns should match the nouns they're referring to. So we will go like this. Every student should bring his or her own notebook to class. You should specify it. The fifth one is the lack of subject-verb agreement. In every sentence, the subject and the verb should agree in number. That means that if the sentence has only one subject, you will use a singular verb. And on the other hand, if it has a multiple subjects, you will use a plural verb. Example, the book that I borrowed from the library have an interesting plot. So the correct one for this is the book that I borrowed from the library has an interesting plot. The word that changed here is only the have into has. The sixth one is the misplaced periods. Confusion about where to put the periods at the end of the sentence is common when you have a quotation mark, parentheses, and other types of punctuation. So, first example is about the periods with quotation mark. So, he asked, "Did you see the movie Avatar?" The period is put after the quotation mark, so it's wrong. The correct one for this is he asked, comma, "Did you see the movie Avatar?" The period should be placed before all closing quotation mark. Second example is all about periods with parentheses. Period with parentheses can be very tricky. When part of the sentences falls inside the parentheses and part falls outside, the period goes outside and the closing parentheses. Like this. I went to the store to buy some groceries. So the period is put before the parentheses, so it's wrong. The correct one for this is I went to the store to buy some groceries. So the period here should be placed after the parentheses because to buy some groceries is part of the sentence. So the seventh one is the dangling modifiers. So let me first define the modifier. So a modifier is a phrase that gives more information about the word in a sentence. Therefore, make sure to use modifiers attaching a right word. If they're incorrectly attached, the sentence might end up being confusing or even funny. Like for example for this, eating my lunch, comma, a spider was crawling on the table. So it's very funny. So the correct one for this is while I was eating my lunch, comma, a spider was crawling on the table. So that's the correct order of the sentence. Eighth one, mixing up hyphens and dashes. So a hyphen is a punctuation mark that is used to join words together. For example, you need a hyphen in merry-go-round, mother-in-law, and 64. So an example sentence of using a hyphen incorrectly is this. She is a well-known valuable player in the community. In this sentence, it uses a dash instead of using a hyphens. So it would go like this to the correct one. She is a well-known valuable player in the country. It should use a hyphen, not a dash. Second is example of using a dashes incorrectly. Incorrect sentence. I have 3 favorite colors: blue, red, and green. In the sentence, it uses a hyphens instead of using a dashes. The correct one for this is I have 3 favorite colors: blue, red, and green. The correct sentence is should be using a dashes. Ninth one is using unnecessary commas. So it is undeniable that we sometimes commit this grammar mistake in writing an essay, professional writing, and other stuff. So because we are cautious where to put the comma correctly. So here's an incorrect example for this. I went to the store, comma, to buy some groceries. So we should not put a comma after the store because it's already a complete sentence without a comma. So the correct one should go like this. I went to the store to buy some groceries. Plain sentence. Next is the 10th one. Mixing up adverbs and adjectives. Another mistake is to use an adjective when you should be using an adverb. Remember that adjectives are used to modify nouns and pronouns. You should always use an adverb, not an adjective, to modify a verb, adjective, or another word. Example, incorrect sentence. She sings beautiful. It's a wrong sentence. So the correct one for this is she sings beautifully. You will use adjective for this and not an adverb. Moving on to number 11, unclear antecedent. So whenever you use a pronoun like she, he, and they, make sure that the reader knows exactly which person each pronoun is referring to. Before I'll give an example, let me first define an antecedent. So it is a word that establishes the person the pronoun refers to, such as Tom, Susie, or the girl in the red dress. Make sure your antecedents are clear so your reader can figure out which person or subject each pronoun refers to. An incorrect example for this is John told Mark that he won the competition. So don't use a pronoun he instead of um, using a particular name for this. Like the correct one for this is John told Mark that Mark won the competition. Number 12, misusing present participles. So we often use present participle for an action that isn't simultaneous to other actions in a sentence. Misusing present participles can make your writing clunky and confuse the reader. So incorrect example for this is reading the book, comma, the phone rang loudly. That's incorrect. So the correct one for this is while she was reading the book, the phone rang loudly. Number 13, mixing up IE and EG. So many people often mixed up IE and EG, especially in professional settings. Always remember that IE's abbreviation comes from it is, which means in other words. Meanwhile, the EG comes from exempli gratia, which means for example. So here's an example of incorrect using of EG. I enjoy outdoor activities, i.e., hiking, swimming, and etc. So that's incorrect. We use an EG instead of IE here. So the correct one would be I enjoy outdoor activities, e.g., hiking, swimming, and etc. Next is using IE incorrectly. She has a favorite color, e.g., black. So the correct one here is using an IE. So it would be like she has a favorite color, i.e., black. Next is mixing up who and whom. So many are confused by the word who and whom. As a rule of thumb, who should be used to describe someone performing an action. Who sent this email? An example for that. While whom should be used to describe someone on receiving end of an action. Example, to whom should I send this email? An incorrect example for this is who did you give the book to? The correct one should whom did you give the book to? It mentioned about who is receiving the action, so we will use the whom. Next is number 15, mixing up between and among. It is another common mix-up involves of words between and among. The word between is used to refer to two or more things that are clearly distinct from one another. Example of using between incorrectly. The agreement was reached among the two parties. The correct one is the agreement was reached between the two parties. You should not use among here instead of using between. So next is using among incorrectly. He stood out between the crowd. That's incorrect. So the correct one is using among. So it would go like this. He stood out among the crowd. Number 16. Inconsistent verb tense. It refers to the use of different tenses within a sentence, paragraph, a piece of writing, leading to confusion or ambiguity in the meaning. When verb tenses are inconsistent, it can make it difficult for the reader understand the timeline or sequence of events being described. Example for this is he reads the book yesterday and will finishes it tomorrow. So the correct option number 1 is using a present tense. So it would go like this. He reads the book yesterday and will finish it tomorrow. Correct option number 2, using a past tense. He read the book yesterday and will finish it tomorrow. Number 17, incomplete comparison. An incomplete comparison is one that explain what you are comparing something against. To avoid confusing the reader, you should always complete your comparisons. Incorrect example for this is, this car is faster. That's incorrect. So the correct one is, this car is faster than the previous model. You add another clause for it to be understandable. Next is number 18, mixing up me, myself, and I. Many of us, especially in business settings, will make the use of mistake using the wrong pronouns when there are multiple subjects or objects in the sentence. As a rule of thumb, you should always use the same pronouns you would use if you had only one subject or object. Incorrect number 1. Me and Gabriel went to the cinema. Incorrect option number 2. Myself and Gabriel went to the cinema. So the correct one of these two options are, Gabriel and I went to the cinema. So next is number 19, mixing up similar words. There are many words that are easy to confuse with one another, even though they don't sound exactly the same. Common mistakes include affect versus affect, accept versus accept, lose versus lose, assure versus ensure, and complement versus complement. So, example for insured and assured, incorrect sentence. He ensured me that everything will be fine. You should not use insured here instead of using assured. So the correct sentence is, he assured me that everything will be fine. Next is using affect and affect in a sentence. So the incorrect one is, the weather will not affect our plans. That's wrong. So you should use affect for this. And it would go like this, the weather will not affect our plans. Lastly is the complement versus complement. Incorrect sentence for this is, I will accept your kind compliment. You will use a complement with li here and not complement with le. So the correct sentence is, I will accept your kind compliment. Number 20, mixing up homonyms. Homonyms are words that sound identical but are spelled differently and mean different things. Common mistakes include there versus there, two versus two versus two, then versus done, and whether versus weather. So here's an example for there versus there. Incorrect sentence. They're going to the park with their friends. You will not use there instead of using there. Correct sentence for this is, they're going to the park with their friends. Two versus two. Incorrect sentence. I ate 2 bananas for breakfast. And then the correct sentence for this is, I ate 2 bananas for breakfast. Then versus than, incorrect sentence. I would rather go to the beach than the mountains. You're comparing here You're comparing the two places here, so you will use than. So the correct sentence for this, I would rather go to the beach than the mountains. It's done. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, guys.